Welcome back to our course, World History. Last time we discussed the Industrial Revolution. We explored the sources of the Industrial Revolution. We also drew the links between what had preceded the Industrial Revolution and why it became possible in particular areas of northwestern Europe, particularly to be specific in England, which gave rise to this phenomenon called the Industrial Revolution. Again, the years 1760s to roughly 1830s, the first stage of the Industrial Revolution. We also mentioned that the Industrial Revolution produced dramatic changes in the life of European people, Northern European people and Southern European people, and then the rest of the world. Other nationalities, cultures had to respond to this Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was one of the major spearheads of so-called modernity or modern life. The entire life of various classes of people was turned upside down. And as we found out last time, the Industrial Revolution received uneven responses from different groups and classes of people. For example, some people were losing as a result of the Industrial Revolution because they felt secure in their old lifestyle. Others just opposite. They welcomed the changes that took place during the Industrial Revolution, the rise of these so-called satanic mills, the industrial sites with the chimneys, textile factories. Okay, cities were growing. The Industrial Revolution, as we found out last time, did dramatically improve the life of the people. If you look at the history of different countries of Northern Europe, in the hindsight, in the long-term perspective, the lives of the people did improve. But many contemporaries did not see their development of Industrial Revolution this way. To many contemporaries, it was something horrible. The industrial order was associated with some kind of satanic forces that changed the life of the people. Okay, there were many intellectuals, activists, and grassroots people who had nostalgia for the old lifestyle. There were some writers in the beginning of the 19th century who romanticized the Middle Ages, this pastoral lifestyle when supposedly peasants and lords had lived together in peace. Of course, it never had been like this, but that's not how contemporaries viewed who cast their industrial changes, the industrial order, against what had existed before. And of course, people in various ages, including the time when we live right now, people tend to romanticize the past. They have nostalgia for the past. Okay, and I repeat, you cannot say that entire society responded to Industrial Revolution in the same way. Okay, so today we are going to begin the story about the formation of modern ideologies. Okay, and of course, these modern ideologies should be linked to these dramatic changes that took place in the life of Europeans and then the rest of the world. We're going to discuss the four major responses to this modern life that so quickly entered societies of Europe and beyond. There were four major ideologies which we're going to discuss, okay, which became part of our life, and to the present day these ideologies survive and they pretty much define our lives, although these ideologies changed in the course of time. So let me name them. Okay, first, we are going to briefly talk about classical liberalism. Okay. Then we are going to talk about conservatism. Third, we are going to discuss socialism. And then next lecture, we are going to talk about nationalism. Nationalism, the most influential ideology, okay, that captivated minds of the people. So we need to explore 4 ideologies. Today, we are going to explore 3: classical liberalism, conservatism, and socialism. So let me start with the first one. Classical liberalism. Classical liberalism, it was, like other ideologies, response of particular groups of people to the changes that happened at the turn of the 1800s. And specifically, the people who embraced this ideology, they could be viewed as the beneficiaries of this industrial order. Okay, these were the immediate beneficiaries of this industrial revolution. These were manufacturers who set up textile mills. These were merchants who were linked to these manufacturers. Okay, these were so-called middle-class people. Okay, many of these people participated in the American Revolution. Remember, it was the revolution of the middle-class people. They participated in the French Revolution. Okay, so they spearheaded this idea that individual freedom should be the cornerstone of political, economic, and social life. Okay, basically, those people who embraced classical liberalism, they followed what Adam Smith articulated, spelled out in his famous book, The Wealth of Nations. I'm simplifying the whole story, but essentially, a classical liberalism embraced the ideals of free trade, individualism, laissez-faire. What does it mean, laissez-faire? Laissez-faire, I told you once when we talked about Adam Smith, it's the expression, French expression, that became a metaphor to refer to the lack of interference, governmental interference. Okay, in particular, laissez-faire is translated from French by a simple phrase: hands off. So the government, hands off, don't interfere in economic, social, and political life. The less government, the better. Okay, classical liberals, they embrace the idea of free trade. The less government, the better. So that was the foundational stone. The human individual was the core of this philosophy. Okay, classical liberals tended and tend to think in terms of individuals. They, for them, groups, races, tribes, nations, religious loyalty, these are secondary for classical liberals. What is important for a classical liberal? It's a human individual. A human individual. That's the core of this philosophy. Okay. Classical liberals argued that there would be losers and winners in this so-called industrial order. Okay, and the free enterprise system does create losers, but at the same time it creates winners. So don't complain if you lose. So basically, it was the philosophy of rising middle class, or as Marxists would have said, the bourgeoisie. Okay, the Marxists, they developed this special expression, the bourgeoisie, or capitalists. It's a more kind of negative expression. Why do I constantly emphasize, I use the adjective classical liberalism? Because those people who live in the United States, they have been exposed to a different notion when they hear the word liberalism or liberal. Okay, because in the United States, since the time of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1930s, the meaning of the word liberal and liberalism changed. Okay, and today, liberalism, when we say liberalism, it means something totally opposite to what I just emphasized. Okay, so present-day liberalism, it's basically a philosophy that is focused on promoting the idea of the big benevolent state. Okay, it's philosophy that today, present-day liberalism, a philosophy that is more concerned about the groups of people, okay, what is beneficial to particular groups of people. It doesn't think too much these days about a human individual, a separate human individual. Okay, a present-day liberalism is more concerned about so-called social justice. Okay, it doesn't follow this philosophy, less government the better. In fact, present-day liberalism does defend overwhelmingly the idea of a big welfare state. Okay, so that is why, to make things easy for us to understand, the best way to describe classical liberalism or classical liberalism is to apply to them present-day expression, American expression, libertarianism. Okay, so if you heard about libertarians or libertarianism, that's what in old times in the 19th century had been called classical liberalism. Okay, so the best current expression to describe classical liberalism in the United States is to use the word libertarianism. But again, it's only in the United States we use this expression of liberalism in the current usage in a different manner. In Europe, well, if you go to Europe, you will still see this old usage like it had been in the 19th century. So if you in Europe say liberal, they immediately know what you're talking about. Liberal means it's a libertarian, okay, in Europe. So it's a philosophy of rising middle class. One of the best representatives of classical liberalism was English politician activist named Richard Cobden, the greatest liberty thinker. Okay, Richard Cobden became famous for his campaign against so-called corn laws. Okay, what I have to explain to you what these corn laws, what it meant. In order to protect English farmers, English government introduced a high customs barriers for grains imported from other countries. So if you wanted to import grain, again, corn, it was the generic name for any kind of corn, cereals, okay, like wheat, rye, actual corn. So it's a generic name. So don't think about maize. It's a corn, generic name for cereals. If you wanted to, in 1810, 1820, to import corn, grain from another country to England, you had to pay a huge customs fee, okay? Since only English farmers had the chance to sell their corn on their own domestic market, okay? Since the foreign corn was kept away from England, they had the chance to charge high prices, okay? So the price of bread was outrageously expensive. But Richard Cobden said, why don't we abolish these customs barriers? Yes, the farmers would lose, but other people would benefit. Who would benefit? Of course, merchants. Merchants would benefit, definitely. Those merchants who traded, grain merchants. Who else would benefit? Workers. Plain work, artisans, people who lived in cities. Because if you import more grain in England, the grain would be cheaper. Okay. So he was very aggressive in terms of his activism. See, he was able to organize demonstrations. He was able to sway many people from English Parliament to support him. He was the greatest advocate of free trade. He said trade should be free, no customs barriers, and the government should not interfere in the free trade. And he also was a big advocate of peace. He said wars retard economic life, destroy economic life, so we should keep peace as much as possible, because alone peace means good trade conditions, which means everybody benefits through exchange. So please keep in mind this name. And eventually he was able to convince the English Parliament to abolish these corn laws. And of course, the prices for bread and cereals dropped, and the diet of working class people did dramatically improve. Okay, so it did benefit workers who worked in these factories, but it did benefit merchants. But of course, farmers did not benefit, okay, because they had to compete with the foreign grains. Another great liberty thinker, classical liberal, is a French writer, Frederic Bastia. Okay. Frederic Bastia is famous for his public essays, in which he mocked conservatives, mocked the feudal aristocrats who tried to worship the big government, who worshipped the royal power. He made fun, mocked governmental monopolies. He was against monopolies. He's like Adam Smith. He said we should encourage free enterprise, and the government should not interfere in economic life. Okay, it should be free competition. Okay. He wrote this small brochure called The Law 1850, where he said the major job of the government is only to defend individual liberty and property and nothing else. And then the rest is hands off, laissez-faire, hands off. These are the only two things the government should take care of: individual freedom, defend individual freedom of people, and property. Frederic Bastia became famous for a very sharp parable called the Candle Maker's Petition. Okay, in this petition, he, in this mocking manner, presented a petition, described an imagined petition submitted by candle makers to the government, to a government. And in this petition, candle makers said, government, please introduce laws and order people to keep their windows closed by curtains, not only at night, but primarily during the daylight. Government, please force, by the force of law, people to keep their windows closed, shaded by curtains. Why? It will promote candle making business. The sun is the greatest enemy of ours. Candle makers petitioned, complained to the government. So please protect us against the sun. So please force people to keep their windows shaded. We need our business to prosper. Okay, so it's basically, in this small parable, Frederic Bastia made fun of monopolies. Okay, because, for example, in England, just an example for you, there was a monopoly called East India Company. By the way, that was the monopoly against which Americans revolted when they, during the Boston Tea Party, they took the boxes of tea that belonged to this East India Company and dumped them in the Boston Harbor. Basically, East India Company in England enjoyed all kind of privileges. For example, they didn't have to pay customs duties. Okay, they could carry their goods anywhere. A lot of privileges from the English crown. That's the type of businesses, quote unquote, that Frederic Bastia made fun of. Now, the second influential ideology that emerged during the Industrial Revolution, conservatism. Okay, conservatism, it means they wanted to conserve something. So at that time, it was people who wanted to defend the old order, the order that had existed before the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and those people who criticized the modern society, industrial order, these were mostly people who were linked to the church, clergy, nobles, many nobles, not all by the way, but many nobles, and peasants. Peasants didn't like it because the industrial life turned the countryside upside down, especially in the countries of Northern Europe. Remember, we talked about so-called Luddites, these angry people who attacked textile factories and wrecked the equipment. Okay, these conservatives, they said that industrial order, and especially the French Revolution, undermined religion, so we need religion. The industrial order brought to life many segments of so-called unwashed masses. So we have a bunch of ignorant people who entered politics, and they were given a decision, they were given the right to make decision without knowing anything about politics and the government. That's what conservatives said. Okay, conservatives at that time, they favored governmental control of trade, governmental control of industry. Okay, which, I repeat, is very much different from present day American conservatism, where American conservatism in fact defends some of the values of classical liberalism: small government, lack of interference on the part of the government. So please don't mix this old conservatism, old school conservatism, with present day conservatism. Although, I repeat, in this case we can see certain links like religion. Present day American conservatism also, not all conservatives, but at least part of present day American conservatism also focused on maintaining religion. Okay, but interesting thing, present day American conservatism is not against popular democracy. Okay, so to some extent present day conservatism has links to the old school conservatives, but in other respects, especially if you look at this last bullet point, it's totally different from the old school conservatism. Okay, old school conservatism is pretty much defense of the royal power, that the order that had existed prior to the industrial order, political revolutions, some aristocrats, clergy. One of the best representatives of conservative movement was a romantic writer, French romantic writer called François René de Chateaubriand. Okay, who was a part of romantic movement. Okay, it's an artistic movement in Europe and the United States that glorified, romanticized the Middle Ages. Okay, pastoral landscapes. That is why we have a bunch of artists, romantic artists, who produced these mysterious romantic paintings. Okay, we have writers like Walter Scott, who wrote novels about knights, where he glorified European knights in the Middle Ages. But this particular guy, Chateaubriand, he wrote a book called The Genius of Christianity, where he said, oh, like it's Christianity, wonderful religion, and we should stick to this. And it was unfortunately undermined by the industrial order. In fact, this guy, the reason I gave you this name is just to draw your attention to the fact that he became so disgusted with the European industrial order that he goes to southern United States, okay, because he read books about Native Americans, and he came to conclusion that somewhere in North America, in this case he thought about the American South, he would be able to find this ideal pastoral, old, romantic lifestyle, which would have nothing to do with the industrial order. So he goes to American South. He actually befriends local Indians, those who remained, who were not removed yet from American South, and he lives among them, and he romanticizes them. Oh, they're so wonderful. They live in tribes. They're stewards of nature. They don't have these nasty satanic mills, you know. And he actually, to some extent, romanticized the American South in general. Okay, so we see here this nostalgia for the old, tribal, feudal way of life. Okay. In fact, he later wrote another novel where he described this romantic love of white guy who lives among Indians and some Native American maiden. Okay, the title of this novel, as far as I remember, is Adelia, something like this. Yeah, but Google this name if you're interested. It's a romantic writer. This one of the best representatives of conservatism. Another person who also was the part of conservative movement was a famous philosopher named Edmund Burke. Okay, he is actually considered not simply conservative, but he is considered the father of modern conservatism. Okay, so he did not reject changes that took place as a result of American Revolution and some changes that took place in Europe during the Industrial Revolution. Okay, but at the same time, he said these changes, they went too far. Especially, he was critical of the French Revolution, which he criticized for being so murderous, for being so radical. Remember, French revolutionists, Jacobins, they practiced terror. Some of them tried to destroy religion. They introduced the religion of reason, and that's what he was angry about. So he said, part of this new modern order undermined tradition, religion, and became obsessed with reason. So he did have a point, because he pointed to these crimes committed by Jacobins, the terror. Remember, 40,000 people were guillotined in France. Okay, in fact, I forgot to tell you that during the French Revolution, during Napoleonic Wars, about 2 million people died. The French people and people of Europe, as a result of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars against Germanic states, Russia. So the total number of people who died as a result of these events was 2 million. So basically, he said that some of the modern changes, they went too far, and he compared, actually, he said what Americans did, American Revolution, it was good, but the French Revolution, it was too radical, too much, too militant. And in case of France, we have the revolution that actually devoured its own children. So it was getting out of control. It's bad. Okay. So he said the reason the French became so militant, so radical, and the French experience during the revolution resulted in so many crimes was because the French revolutionists forgot about tradition and religion. Okay. Which didn't happen in the United States. So he credited the Americans for maintaining religion and for sticking to a tradition. And by the way, it was easy, of course, to the Americans to stick their tradition because they did not have feudal tradition, right? What was traditional for Americans? What is traditional? To be an American traditionalist. It means to be loyal to the Constitution, right? That was the American tradition. There was nothing, there was no other American tradition. What's a Judeo-Christian legacy, different brands of Christianity, and the Constitution. There was nothing else to bring American together. And so it was easy for Americans to kind of latch on this tradition. And today, to the present day, again, American traditionalism, it's a very much different from what in Europe some people might understand by tradition. Because when we go to Europe, you may say that the European or Russian or Chinese tradition, it's about soil, it's about ancient culture. So such things had not existed in the United States. So again, there was no traditional culture in the United States. There was no ancient culture. Okay. But there was the Constitution. So that was the American tradition. So anyway, just remarks on the margins. Just the reason, in fact, I made this detour to stress that American traditionalism, in fact, is a very progressive thing. Okay. So that is why it's so difficult for people who try to attack this American traditionalism to come up with some kind of alternatives, okay, and some alternatives that invited to fight against American traditionalism, they actually could be viewed as reactionary things, okay, because they want to undermine this tradition, which is by nature progressive, because it's American tradition revolves around the Constitution, okay. Anyway, I would like to move further to the third powerful ideology, and we're going to talk more about it because it captivated the minds of the millions of people. It's socialism, and a militant branch of socialism called communism. That is why I put these two things separated by this slash. So socialism / communism. Socialism is a modern ideology that emerged as a response of some educated middle classes and working class people to industrial revolution, okay? It's a response to dislocations produced by the industrial revolution, unemployment, okay, some sense of envy, jealousy, or a sense of inequality, which people found out who came to live in cities, and the inequality they found in cities between their lifestyle and the lifestyle of so-called bourgeoisie, and how they acted upon this inequality. So how they acted, being frustrated about unemployment, how they acted, being frustrated about dislocations when people had to live by clock, work by clock, and when they had to work a long day, working day, okay, became known as socialism. A lot of frustrations that emerged as a result of this sense of discontent about the Industrial Revolution found its manifestation in this new ideology called socialism. Okay, socialism is basically socialism emerged as a set of campaigns or pleading on behalf of working class people who worked in cities. Okay, so the first socialists, they pleaded on behalf of the working people. They pleaded to the government, so please improve their lifestyle, please cut their working hours. Their working day is so long it reaches 15 hours. Okay, so let's cut their hours. let's plan economy from up above by the government, okay, to make it more efficient. Let's let's make people equal. So let's increase the salaries of people, working class people, okay. Let's guarantee their security because they feel threatened by unemployment. So let's introduce some kind of unemployment insurance. Let's distribute the wealth because wealth is spread so uneven. So let's equalize people, okay. And then basically, socialists, they became concerned about outcomes. So let's make outcomes equal. So they noted that some people in society succeed, some don't succeed enough, others fail, and that's what upset them. They suggested that we would make outcomes of any competition in our society equal. So nobody should be the winner, nobody should be a loser, so everybody should be equal. An interesting philosophy, right? Very popular to the present day, by the way, because in fact currently in some countries, especially in the United States, we have a small renaissance of socialism, okay. So small renaissance. One of the first people to promote socialism was Henri Saint-Simon, a French aristocrat, by the way. He was an aristocrat, but who was upset about the plight of the working people. So he wrote a bunch of books where he decided to create the religion of humanity. Okay, where in he said that government should be controlled by so-called enlightened masters. Basically, scientists who would plan on the basis of science the development of human societies. Rationally, they should plan the development of society. Okay, and government should interfere in the economy on behalf of everybody to make everybody equal. Okay, and the government should look out for less fortunate. So his students began calling themselves socialists. Another guy who was one of the first socialists was English textile manufacturer, in fact. His name is Robert Owen. In fact, it was Robert Owen who is considered the first to use this expression of socialism. Okay, Robert Owen was a successful textile manufacturer who was upset about horrendous working conditions of working class people. So he decided to change the regime, working regime at his factories. So he cut the working hours. He introduced unemployment insurance. At the same time, he was a control freak. So he forced managers literally to hover over his workers to watch how they were doing, what they were doing, how much they produced. And in fact, each worker was closely watched. He also tried to control the personal lives of his workers. So checking if they were drinking or not drinking, what they were eating. You know, he also set up first schools. He was a big promoter of public schooling. And unfortunately, by doing these things, he was not able to sustain his factories, and he got broke. He also became famous for going to the United States, trying to set up a model socialist community. So on the banks of the Wabash River in Indiana, state of Indiana, he set up a model socialist settlement called New Harmony, okay, where he brought his supporters, about 900 supporters, and he declared, they adopted the Declaration of Mental Independence, like to show that we have a better document than the American Declaration of Independence. So he wanted to set up, he wanted to become to make his model community as the blueprint, how we should organize our life according to socialist principles. Unfortunately, like in many cases, there were communities created after him. He failed. So soon, in 6 months, in 5-6 months, those people who moved into this community where money did not exist, where land belonged to everybody, there was no private land ownership, no private property, where people worked as much as they wanted, and where people could help themselves by going to communal storages to grab as much food as they needed. And as soon people started to complain that, oh, I work more than my neighbor, they started to accuse each other, and soon we have a bunch of rival factions within this community who attacked each other, and in a year community was gone. It became bankrupt, and in disgust Robert Owen went back to England, but he didn't give up. So what he did, he decided to come up with a more reasonable idea. So he became one of the big promoters of cooperative movements. So he set up, he encouraged English working class people to set up co-ops, C-O-O-P, cooperative stores, cooperative societies, without denouncing private property. At the same time, he said that people collectively should pool their resources, and historically Robert Owen became known as one of the major spearheads of the cooperative movement in England, okay? Whereas his socialist experiments failed in his textile business, and especially in Indiana, in his so-called New Harmony project, okay? But there were other socialists, more militant socialists, who argued that setting up model communities, it was not the way to go. You cannot convince people who privately own factories, companies, to give up or to share the wealth. It doesn't work this way. That's what these radical socialists argued. You have to come and take it by force. That's what they argued, okay? You cannot plead, you cannot be so naive to convince the government that they would take something from bourgeoisie and share it with people, okay? So that is why these militant socialists called people like Robert Owen or Henri Saint-Simon utopians. And the founder of this militant radical trend in socialism was Karl Marx. Maybe you heard this name, right? I'm sure you did. So Marx is considered the founder of philosophy called Marxism, and the movement based on the philosophy of Marxism, and the movement named communism, okay? So communism, a militant branch of socialism, also became very popular. Basically, communism, it's an extreme version of socialism. And the message Karl Marx and his friends sent to society was that instead of pleading, you have to come and take it. Okay, and how do you take it? You have to have a socialist revolution. Okay, you phase out these property owners, you destroy them, and you bring to power so-called dictatorship of the proletariat. That's what Karl Marx argued. Okay, he said, by force, workers, industrial workers in cities who work in the factories, navigated by revolutionaries, they should take over power and they should impose the dictatorship of the proletariat. So that's the expression used by Karl Marx. So he defended the dictatorship. And these dictators, they would phase out so-called oppressors, and that's when the paradise would come. Okay, the communism would come, this golden age when people would be brothers and sisters, okay, and people would be happy forever and ever. Karl Marx and his close friend Friedrich Engels, they worked together, okay. they came from Germany. Karl Marx was an assimilated German Jew, a reporter, who was persecuted by Prussian government, and he escaped to England, where he lived half of his life. Karl Marx came not from a rich family. He never had money. He actually didn't work a single day in his lifetime. He was supported by his close friend named Frederic Engels. Frederic Engels was a rich man. He was a member of a rich lineage German family that owned textile mills both in Germany and in England, in Manchester. Okay, so like many rich people, Frederic Engels sympathized with the poor people, wanted to do something for the poor people. So sometimes people use this expression, limousine left. So I guess Frederic Engels can be called the limousine left, using modern day usage. Okay. By chance, he befriended Karl Marx. Okay, they became close friends, and in fact, in this friendship, Karl Marx was considered the major one, the brain who called the shots, and Engels, basically a man who had a humble character. He didn't like to dominate. Okay, so he agreed to be like a secondary person in this friendship. But he had money, a lot of money, and he provided Karl Marx. He set up a stipend for Marx, and Marx received it each month, his allowance. Okay. Together in 1848, they wrote a small brochure called the Communist Manifesto. Okay. A group of German workers asked them, who sympathized with socialism, they asked them to write this book like a catechism of socialism. And they called it the Communist Manifesto. Why? Because they purposely decided to choose this expression, communism, in order to separate themselves from those socialists who had been active before or during their lifetime. Okay, they wanted to send a message, but they were militant socialists. Okay, that's what they wanted to say. And basically, in this book, it's a very popular book. It was a very popular book. In fact, it's considered the second major popular book after the Bible. Communist Manifesto was translated in almost all major languages, from English and Russian to Mongolian and Swahili. Okay, all kinds of languages. In this book, Karl Marx and Frederic Engels predicted the coming of the new order, communism. Okay, and they expected this new order, this paradise, golden paradise, when there would be no rich, no poor, and everybody would be working as much as they want, and everybody would have plenty of food, everything. So this utopian vision. In fact, they were utopians themselves, although they criticized their predecessors for being utopian. Okay, but the major difference between them and the two other names I mentioned before was that Marx and Engels, they advocated the violent revolution against capitalism, against the industrial order. Okay, and they also argued that the dictatorship of the proletariat, this class of people who worked in factories, they should come and take power, because these were noble savages. In fact, Karl Marx and Frederic Engels argued that they invented the natural law. And according to this natural law, industrial workers were destined to become the chosen people who were to redeem the world from the oppression. Okay, they argued that the industrial revolution that created factories, they brought these workers together, and workers were rubbing shoulders, and they developed in this sense of camaraderie, the sense of collectivism. And as a result of this natural law, eventually they come to hate this society, the system that exploits them, and they revolt against this system. Okay, basically, what I'm trying to say, communism was a surrogate political religion. Okay, it grew out of Judeo-Christian tradition because they promoted this concept of the chosen people, that workers were the chosen people who were expected to destroy the private property. Again, another thing I wanted to emphasize is that socialists who were had been active before Karl Marx and Frederic Engels, they criticized the private property, but they didn't call to eliminate private property. Okay, they said it should be regulated. But Marx and Engels, they said private property is the major enemy. It should be squashed. Okay. So basically, communism was a very aggressive political religion that prophesied the paradise on the earth, and the working class proletariat, that's how Marxists call working class people, was to be the savior. Marx and Engels and their successors also argued that workers should be led to a revolution by a communist party, so-called enlightened apostles, who would lead the working class people and then the rest of the humankind to the better future. Okay. And Marxism believes that communist order would be the last stage in human history. They said before communism, it was prehistory of human society. But when we take over power, communists, when we establish our system, that would be it. So that would be communism forever and ever. So it's a secular religion, I repeat, political secular religion. As we find out in our course, there will be many lectures. We will be talking about Soviet communism, Chinese communism, because this radical version of socialism became quite popular throughout the 20th century. But we would find out that attempts to plant communism in different countries miserably failed. Okay, those countries that attempted to base the governments on communism ultimately have failed, and eventually these countries became pure ruthless dictatorships. So that's what we will explore throughout this course. Okay. On this note, let me finish, and next time we will be talking about nationalism, the fourth major ideology. The entire class will be devoted to the investigation of this fourth major modern ideology, again called nationalism. So today we discussed three other major ideologies: classical liberalism, conservatism, and socialism/communism. Next time, nationalism. Thank you for your attention, and I will